Breaking news coming in the last couple of minutes or so when it comes to former AEW World Champion CM Punk. Amid rumours he could return to AEW, he's now taken to Instagram in a now deleted story explaining the story behind his comeback from a foot injury last year, suggesting that Jon Moxley refused to lose to him. He's called Chris Jericho a liar and Dave Meltzer a liar as well, explaining why he was having difficulty backstage in one of his final matches in AEW. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. We'll get into every other story tomorrow in tomorrow's AEW news video, but this is a developing and breaking news story when it comes to the former two-time AEW World Champion CM Punk. Now, Punk has been spoken about a lot because he's always spoken about, but particularly in the last 24 hours because Dave Meltzer did a story where he suggested that CM Punk was, quote, looking to get back into AEW after he's recovered from his tricep surgery after he sustained a torn triceps in the main event of All Out last year when he defeated Jon Moxley to become a two-time AEW World Champion. But if you cast your mind back to AEW during that period of time, he had just come back from a broken foot, which he had sustained literally the Dynamite after he won the AEW World Championship for the first time against Hangman Adam Page at Double or Nothing. And of course, during that period of time, he was having some difficulties backstage with Hangman, the Elite, etc. anyway. But now CM Punk has opened up more about the issues that he was having at that time, maybe in response to Meltzer suggesting that he's looking to get back into AEW, but also it's a side of things we just really hadn't heard anything about. We had always assumed that CM Punk's issues were with Hangman Page, Colt Cabana, the Elite. Of course, the Elite are the reason CM Punk's not currently in AEW at the moment, in addition to also the torn triceps injury. But of course, Punk was involved in Brawl Out, the backstage brawl with the Elite after AEW All Out, after his infamous post-show media scrum rant involving Hangman Page, Scott Colton, Colt Cabana, the Elite as well, calling out the EVPs. This then led to a brawl in his dressing room with punches being thrown and all that kind of stuff. All involved were suspended. Of course, we now know the Elite are back on television. They're two-time AEW World Trios champions. They just lost the championships. Kenny Omega's competing on television in dream matches, but Punk is nowhere to be seen. Now, again, there's been these stories about Punk maybe looking to get back in, and it's a decision that Tony Khan's got to make. Well, Punk has been dropping teasers that he wants to get back into pro wrestling, seemingly, or he's still got the pro wrestling bug, and he does all of these teasers on Instagram, particularly on the Instagram stories or in Instagram comments on certain other pro wrestling posts, but he is posted this story this evening and subsequently deleted it. I don't know if when you're watching this he would have put it back up or anything like that, but as of right now at the time of recording he hasn't put the post back up. But the post is legit. It was on his Instagram story and then was quickly taken down, and it gives a bit of an update as to what was going on behind the scenes when he returned from a foot injury last year. So just to paint the picture once again, this is what happened. CM Punk was in the AEW World Championship picture. He defeated Hangman Adam Page for the AEW World Championship at Double or Nothing 2022. The following episode of Dynamite, he teamed up with FTR in a trios match. When making his entrance, he did a dive into the crowd and he broke his foot on the barricade. This led to him being out of action for a couple of months, and an interim champion was crowned. That interim world champion was Jon Moxley. He became the interim AEW World Champion at Forbidden Door, defeating Hiroshi Tanahashi. Then CM Punk came back to AEW at Quake at the Lake after Jon Moxley had defeated Chris Jericho to retain the interim AEW World Championship. This then set up an undisputed AEW World Championship match. Many assumed the match was going to be taking place in Chicago at All Out. It made the most sense. That didn't happen. Instead, they had the match a couple of weeks later on AEW Dynamite, and in shocking fashion, Jon Moxley squashed CM Punk in a matter of seconds, becoming the undisputed AEW World Champion. They then did a storyline where Punk was unsure of himself, uncertain about himself. His friend Ace Steel, who was actually involved in the Brawl Out situation as well, came out, did a pep talk to CM Punk, said, "You can do it, you can do it, you can do it." Punk then faced Jon Moxley once again at All Out for the AEW World Championship. He won that match, becoming a two-time AEW World Champion in the process. Now, people at the time suggested that the whole CM Punk return returning and facing Moxley just a couple of weeks later on Dynamite felt odd, it felt rushed, and many just assumed it was Tony Khan trying to get a big number for an undisputed World Championship match on Dynamite, and maybe that is what it is, but according to Punk, there are some finer details in what's him shooting on the matter, or certainly giving his side of the events on social media. So let's get his comment up on the screen, or his story up on the screen rather, and you can see it right there. I've blown it up as big as I can so you can see better exactly what he says. I will read it out though. So he says, quote, "Sai, I wasn't cleared to come back to wrestle yet," referring to when he came back at Quake at the Lake. Then the plan was to wrestle at the pay-per-view, I'm assuming that being All Out. I sat and listened to Moxley's Rocky 3 idea. I explained how I'd never seen a Rocky movie. Now, I think what he's referring to is, again, losing, having doubts about yourself and coming back. The storyline that essentially played out on television. It continues, "And I thought the idea sucked, but if the boss wanted to do it, whatever. He said he wouldn't lose to me." Again, that's key. I should repeat myself because I stumbled over myself there. Quote, "He said he wouldn't lose to me." So he's suggesting that Jon Moxley had openly refused to lose to CM Punk. "I'd never experienced someone refusing to lose to me. I just laughed. I asked Tony if this is what he wanted. He said yes. He's the boss. So I said okay, but I need to be cleared first." It continues, "They kept saying it could be just a squash, so I didn't need to be cleared. I scoffed at that. My health is more important." Now, let's just take that bit there. So he is suggesting that Jon Moxley, I'm guessing in that first match on Dynamite, refused to lose. Or it was a case of, I'm not willing to put CM Punk over until I beat him first. I want to be protected coming out of this. I'm the real world champion. I've been an interim champion all summer. I've carried this company. I've helped this company. I've saved this company. Therefore, when Punk comes back, he needs to do me the favors. He needs to make me the world champion. If indeed it's only for a couple of weeks, I deserve that. I refuse to lose. Now, the issue of that is, as far as we know, Jon Moxley does not have creative control. Obviously, he can refuse a job, i.e. no one can force him to go out there to do it. He should. That's what a pro wrestler should do. That's what a professional should do. But at the same time, I suppose, nobody can force him to go out there. So if Jon Moxley, at a time, remember too, which his contract was coming up around that period of time, says to Tony Khan, I refuse to lose, and guess what? I might not sign a new contract. I might just go do the Indies. I might just go do New Japan. And then you might lose me. Maybe puts Tony Khan in a position where Tony's got to try and mediate this thing and try and find a way where he can get CM Punk to put over Moxley because of the work he had done in the year, but also Punk ends up as the AEW World Champion, which was always the plan in the first place. But certainly, it's a bit of a black eye on Jon Moxley if CM Punk's version of events is accurate, that he's suggesting that Moxley had refused to put CM Punk over and refused to lose to him, and Punk seemingly was quite shocked by this, and Tony Khan wanted it to be a squash match. Then, this is when it does get quite serious. CM Punk had not been cleared to compete. He had suffered a foot injury, and by all accounts, it was a real bad broken foot injury. Essentially, he had to learn to walk again. When Punk returned at Quake at the Lake, it was a surprise because just a couple of weeks prior, Punk was seen at, I think it was a Comic-Con or one of those conventions, and I think he was also doing some AEW media at the time, and he was in a boot. He was in a walking boot, and by all accounts, he was really struggling to walk. He was struggling to put weight on his foot. He was seen icing his foot the whole time, and for him just to be back a couple of weeks later, people found it surprising, and people had this assumption of he was just working everyone. He was working everyone at that event. He was working all of the boys and the girls backstage, and he was being CM Punk. He was being old school. Whereas Punk is actually saying, in reality, I wasn't cleared at the time. The plan was for me to come back and wrestle it All Out. But the match on Dynamite was significantly a couple of weeks prior to All Out. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks before All Out, which again felt odd. So he had to get cleared by the doctor. He wasn't opposed to putting Moxley over, according to Punk, and this is always going to be slanted toward Punk's version of events, and he's always going to paint himself out as the good guy, as we all do when we talk about ourselves in the first person. But he's suggesting he didn't have an issue putting Moxley over. He found it quite disrespectful that Moxley had basically said, I'm not going to lose to you, I refuse to lose to you, but I've got to get cleared first. And the pushback to that was, well, it's just a squash match. So necessarily you don't have to be cleared. Which again, if that is true, that's quite concerning, because the bottom line is the most important thing is the health of the performers. The bottom line is the health of everyone involved. And people could say, it's just a foot injury. Foot injuries can lead to lots of things, and they can lead to dangerous things, and you can do yourself permanent damage. So the fact that they go, it's just a squash match, it doesn't matter. Combat's combat. Taking bumps is taking bumps. So that's quite concerning. And he had said that my health is more important. Clearly, in the end, he did get cleared, but at the same time, did he get cleared by his doctor to just do that squash match and really have not that much offense, or did he get cleared to have a proper wrestling match, which he did have a couple of weeks later? It continues also by saying Dave Meltzer is a liar, Jericho is a liar and a stooge. There were plans, but plans always change, but I'll never put a company above my health ever again. Now that's quite vague, that last part. Obviously the first part isn't, where he says Dave Meltzer is a liar. I have said this throughout the entirety of this Brawlout saga, and it is a saga that's been ongoing for months at this point. It's been ongoing since the end of August, September at this point. But I've always said, when it comes to Dave Meltzer's perspective on things, Brian Alvarez's perspective on things, and this is coming from someone that has a wrestling news channel, is you always have to be cautious about where the news comes from. And when we're talking about an incident and everyone's got their version of events, the truth is somewhere in the middle. The truth isn't exactly on the Elite side, and it certainly isn't exactly on CM Punk's side either. It is somewhere in the middle. But at the same time, people that definitely weren't in the room were Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez. So they have to get their information from someone. And we know it's out there. It's factually accurate. Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez, they're very close with the Young Bucks. They're very close with Kenny Omega. And if you look at how this story has been pitched by them and how it has been painted by them, it's very pro-Elite. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is if you believe in unbiased journalism, but it's important to always read that with an open mind. However, not a lot of people do. And to be honest, where CM Punk's issues started with the Elite 2 come from things being put out there that suggested that he was actively lobbying to get Colt Cabana fired, which has been disputed. Dave Meltzer's backtracked and said, I never said that, and he never did, but it was kind of intimated. And that's the problem with Dave, is that he intimates a lot of things. He reports factual things, and then he speculates on others, and people get that mixed up. And I'm not saying Dave Meltzer's the origin of all of this, but he's part of it. Certainly he is. Now, Chris Jericho, he's someone that reportedly immediately after the Brawlout situation got in CM Punk's face, called him a cancer to AEW and a detriment to the locker room. Jericho's also spoken about or referenced about, grabbing the locker room and taking the locker room by force and uniting the locker room and saving AEW. After the incident at All Out. And I saw an interview recently that Jericho did with Renee Paquette on the Sessions podcast. And look, Chris Jericho's a legend. He's a future Hall of Famer. And he is very much responsible for, not responsible, but he was a big part in the early growth of AEW, no doubt about that. But one thing Chris Jericho likes to talk about is Chris Jericho. And he believes it's his company. He believes, he can mock Hulk Hogan and all that kind of stuff, but some of his tactics are very Hogan-ish or very Triple H-ish, i.e. work with the younger talent that's getting hot and that's getting over and make sure that you win. But because you're associated in an angle with them, the angle gets ratings and it gets views and you keep yourself relevant. He's doing what veterans do. And certainly Jericho, whenever he's done interviews, he hasn't gone outwardly and bashed CM Punk, but he's done everything to ensure that maybe he's painted him in a certain light. In addition to that, Jericho very, 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 very clearly does talk to the Observer, because you have seen things actually said by Jericho in recent interviews that were reported verbatim in the Observer or on F4W Online. And this isn't me being pro CM Punk or anything like that. This is just, these are the facts of the situation. Again, you have to be careful with what you hear because it's not always exactly the truth. Dax Harwood did his podcast and he had his version of events that was quite a lot different to the Observer's versions of events. And I don't believe necessarily everything that Dax is saying either because he wasn't there. He said he wasn't there. Only a few people know exactly what happened in that room and they're all given different versions of opinions on it. but he says Jericho's a liar and a stooge. This is the bit where we're not really sure as to what it does mean when he says there were plans, but plans always change, but I'll never put a company above my health ever again. I don't know what the plans he might be referring to are, whether it's the plans for after All Out, before everything happened, or if he was talking about plans to come back. You know, there might have been plans to come back. I don't know. This feels very sudden. I'm not sure what would have caused CM Punk to come out and say this now, of all times. Why now? Why would he come out now and say these things? Why would he come out and post this story and then subsequently delete it very, very quickly? I'm not sure. CM Punk has a long history of having companies run him into the ground and, in his mind, hurt his health over his, just because they need him to perform. WWE, that's the basis of a lot of things, isn't it? You know, the Mercer infection and the lawsuit and all that kind of stuff. So is this... I do kind of read this and say to myself, is CM Punk trying to get fired? Because that's what it kind of feels like a little bit, you know? We had heard at the time that CM Punk was in negotiations with AEW for a buyout of his contract. However, one of the big stopping points was a non-compete clause, which CM Punk didn't want and Tony Khan did. And we hadn't heard anything really since then. Punk was rehabbing his torn triceps. You could argue that because he's getting closer to being cleared now, he's thinking, look, I want to wrestle. And if it's not in AEW, I'll chance it. I'll see if I can go back to WWE. Or I might just try and sign with New Japan Pro Wrestling. I can do that. I could go sign with New Japan. I don't have to work with AEW, but they'll have me. I know they'll have me. Or I can do something else. So when he says that last bit, I'll never put a company above my health ever again, he's accusing AEW of putting money and putting matches above his health, above the care of the performers, which is something that Tony Khan has refuted recently by talking about paying for hotels and transport and the security surrounding the wrestlers as well. Now, again, to be honest, there are parts of this that I can really believe. I think this is the problem, is some of it is very, very, very believable. Because it did feel odd. When he came back last year, the creative was strange. Lots of people assumed it was going to be CM Punk versus Moxley at the pay-per-view, Undisputed Championship. That makes a ton of sense. That's good money. That's good creative. And then for it to be done on Dynamite, again, people had assumed, it's just a big rating. It didn't really do a massive rating at the time either. And people felt that was odd and that was strange. And to be honest, with Punk winning, it just felt like a strange story that they didn't need to tell. And Punk's basically suggesting that it was done because Moxley wanted to have one victory and he refused to lose otherwise, which isn't the way business should be done. And it would imply that it wasn't just Hangman Page, and it wasn't just the Elite that CM Punk was having issues with backstage. Now, whilst it's been painted out there that nobody liked CM Punk backstage in AEW, that's not true, because we know at least FTR did, and others have gone on the record since Punk's absence to say that they hope he comes back. But it would also suggest that maybe he was having issues with Moxley as well at the time, which is surprising because Moxley doesn't really usually have issues with anybody. So this is a really big development because it's really been the first time CM Punk in depth has spoken about anything in regards to last year. Now, he can't talk about the brawl-out situation because by all accounts, everyone's sworn to NDAs and nobody can talk about it. Kenny Omega said so during his interview with Renee Paquette on the Sessions podcast as well. But to me, I read this as Punk saying, you know what, I ain't coming back. And if I'm not coming back, I'm going to find a way to force myself out. We've seen people do this in entertainment and the world recently. We saw Cristiano Ronaldo do it with Manchester United. He sat down with Piers Morgan. He lambasted the ownership. He lambasted the facilities and the manager. And next thing you know, he was gone. Now, I don't know if Tony Khan is going to go the same route with CM Punk. You could argue, because this is pro wrestling as well, everything's a work. And this is, once again, just to throw people off the scent, and Punk will be back. He'll be with FTR. FTR is going to lose against the Guns. It wasn't the Blackpool Combat Club that attacked the Young Bucks. It was actually CM Punk and FTR, and it's all red herrings, and Punk's going to be back at All Out. All Out's not going to be in the Now Arena in Chicago. It's going to be at the United Center this year. Punk's going to be back, and it's going to be amazing. And that might be entirely true. But it feels very close to home. So what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts on this development in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. Remember, you can join the WN365 roster by clicking that join button, and I'm sure I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.